A first-class cabin is supposed to be a sanctuary of peace, but for one passenger, it became a stage for her own downfall. A wealthy woman dripping in diamonds looks at the 18-year-old black teen sitting in the most expensive seat on the plane and decides she doesn't belong. She calls the flight attendant, she takes photos, and she files a formal security complaint, accusing the girl of being a threat. What she doesn't know is that her complaint just landed on the desk of the one man she should never have crossed, the girl's father, and the CEO who owns the entire airline. Before we begin, comment where you are watching from today, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Now let's get into it. The Apex Air flagship lounge at JFK's Terminal 4 was a hushed world of clinking glasses and muted business calls. It was designed to be an oasis from the chaos of the airport, but for Caroline Hayes, it was just another place to find fault. She was a woman in her late 50s, encased in a beige Chanel tracksuit that seemed to be wearing her rather than the other way around. Her face was a mask of expensive, tight dissatisfaction. "This espresso," she announced to the lounge attendant loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "Tastes like battery acid. Does anyone here know how to pull a proper shot?" The attendant, a young man named Leo, just smiled thinly. "I do apologize, ma'am. I can have it remade." "Don't bother," Caroline snapped, turning her attention to her phone. She was scrolling through her daughter's Instagram feed, a girl who called herself L.A. Caroline Jr., and tut-tutting at a photo she deemed unflattering. Across the lounge, seated by the floor-to-ceiling windows, was Maya Harrison. At 18, Maya was the picture of understated comfort. She wore a simple gray Stanford University hoodie, black leggings, and a pair of pristine Nike sneakers that were probably worth more than Caroline's shoes, but didn't scream it. Her hair was pulled back in a neat puff, and she was deeply engrossed in a thick paperback, A Brief History of Time. Maya was flying to LAX for a prestigious summer STEM conference for young physicists, a last-minute trip her father had arranged. She was used to airports, used to travel, and unfortunately used to people like Caroline Hayes. The first brush-up happened at the concierge desk. Maya had a question about her connecting flight to a smaller, private airfield. She was waiting patiently when Caroline swept past her, cutting directly in line, and slapped her Hermes Birkin bag on the counter. "I am in 2C on flight 101, Caroline declared, ignoring Maya completely. "I need to ensure that my nut allergy is on file. Last time they served cashews and I could have died. Died! I am a platinum medallion member." The desk agent, trying to be polite, gestured to Maya. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but this young lady was next." Caroline didn't even look at Maya. She just scoffed, a short barking sound. "Honey, some of us have actual priority. I have a plane to catch." Maya spoke, her voice clear and calm, not rising. "I was next, but please, go ahead. Your issue seems urgent." The subtle emphasis on urgent was lost on Caroline, who just sniffed. "As it should be." The desk agent, however, glanced at Maya's boarding pass as she held it. The name Harrison M. was flagged with a small private code, AR Exec Fam. The agent's eyes widened almost imperceptibly, but she held her professional composure. She knew exactly who this girl was. She processed Caroline's request with stiff efficiency, avoiding eye contact with the entitled woman. Once Caroline had swept away, the agent turned to Maya, her demeanor changing instantly to one of warm, genuine respect. "I'm so sorry about that, Miss Harrison. How can I help you today?" "It's fine," Maya said with a small, weary smile. "It's just a day ending in ya." Maya got her information and returned to her seat, sinking back into her book. She watched Caroline across the lounge, loudly complaining into her phone about the help and the clientele in the lounge. Maya knew this wasn't over. People like Caroline didn't just have one bad interaction. It was a lifestyle. She sighed, closed her book, and prepared for boarding. The peace was already broken. Flight 101, a gleaming Airbus A321T, was Apex Air's flagship transcontinental route. Its first-class cabin was a cocoon of private suites, each with a lie-flat bed and a closing door. Maya was in seat 1A, the suite in the very front, window side. She had stowed her carry-on, slipped off her sneakers, and was already wrapped in a blanket, looking out the window as the rest of the cabin boarded. Minutes later, Caroline Hayes arrived, causing a minor bottleneck as she tried to shove her oversized, bright red Gucci carry-on into an overhead bin that was clearly too small for it. "This is ridiculous," she huffed. "This bin is defective." A flight attendant named David, the lead purser for the flight, glided over. "Ma'am, may I suggest we place that in the forward closet for you? It will be much safer." "Fine," Caroline snapped. As David took the bag, she turned to find her seat, 2C. Her eyes scanned the cabin and landed on Maya, comfortably settled in 1A. Caroline's face went through a rapid series of emotions: confusion, then disbelief, then a tightening of the lips into a sneer of pure, unfiltered indignation. She marched over to Maya's suite. Maya, sensing the shadow, looked up from the window. "Excuse me," Caroline said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I think you're in the wrong cabin. Economy is back that way." She flicked her hand dismissively toward the rear of the plane. Maya met her gaze evenly. "I'm in 1A, this is 1A. Now don't be difficult, dear," Caroline said, her voice taking on a sickly, sweet, patronizing tone. "Did you get lost? Did one of the attendants get you confused? This seat is over $10,000. You've made a mistake." "I'm not mistaken," Maya said, her voice quiet but firm. "This is my seat." By now, other first-class passengers were pausing to watch, their expressions ranging from annoyed at the delay to curious. Caroline, sensing an audience, puffed herself up. This was no longer a mistake, it was an outrage. She spun around and flagged down David, who was just returning. "Sir, attendant, this girl is in a first-class suite. She's refusing to move. She clearly snuck on or has a fake ticket." David, a consummate professional with 20 years of flying, felt a familiar migraine starting. He approached Maya. "Ma'am, may I please see your boarding pass?" Maya, used to this exact drill, handed it to him. He glanced at it, then at his official passenger manifest. He saw the Harrison M and the Air Exec FAM code. His internal alarms went off. He handed the pass back to Maya with a polite, deferential nod. "Thank you, Miss Harrison. You are indeed in 1A. Everything is perfectly in order." He then turned to Caroline. "Ma'am, this passenger is correctly ticketed for her suite. Please take your seat. We are preparing for departure." Caroline's face turned a shade of blotchy red that clashed horribly with her tracksuit. "You've got to be kidding me. You're telling me she belongs here? Did you check her ID? Did you check her credit card? I bet it's stolen. This airline's standards have fallen off a cliff. What is Apex Air coming to, letting just anyone into the premium cabin?" The coded language was as transparent as glass. Anyone meant black. Anyone meant young. Anyone meant someone who didn't look like Caroline. Maya, who had been trying to remain detached, finally spoke up, her voice sharp with an authority that made Caroline blink. "I am a paying passenger just like you. My ticket is valid. Your behavior is disruptive and frankly racist. Please leave me alone and go to your seat." The word racist hung in the air. Caroline recoiled as if struck. "How dare you?" she shrieked. "Me? Racist? I'm trying to maintain this cabin's security. You're the one being aggressive. I am a platinum member. I'm going to have your job," she yelled at David. "And as for you," she snarled at Maya, "this is not over. I am going to report you both." "Ma'am," David said, his voice now cold and official, "you are delaying an international flight and harassing another passenger. Take your seat now or I will have you removed from this aircraft." The finality in his tone, and the threat of being hauled off the plane in front of everyone, finally broke through Caroline's rage. She gave Maya one last venomous glare, pulled her jacket tight and stomped back to 2C, fuming. She buckled her seatbelt with a violent yank, her mind already spinning. She wasn't just going to report them, she was going to ruin them. The plane climbed to its cruising altitude, and the cabin lights dimmed. Meal service began. David, walking a professional tightrope, treated both Caroline and Maya with impeccable, if slightly frosty, politeness. Caroline, however, made a show of her displeasure. She accidentally sloshed her champagne as David handed it to her, staining the carpet near his feet. "Oops, so clumsy, just like your service." She sent back her lobster thermidor, claiming it was mealy and a biological hazard, demanding the cheese plate instead, which she then picked at as if it were poison. All the while she kept glancing at Maya. Maya, determined not to let this woman ruin her trip, had put on her noise-canceling headphones and was watching a documentary on particle physics, a pre-downloaded lecture from a Caltech professor. Caroline watched her, her anger festering. She saw a young woman who was unbothered, and it infuriated her. How could this girl, after being publicly called out, be so calm? It was, to Caroline, proof of arrogance, proof that she was exactly the kind of person who didn't belong. Caroline pulled out her laptop and paid the $40 for the Apex Stream high-speed Wi-Fi. She had work to do. First, she opened her camera. Angling her phone, she took several discreet, grainy photos of Maya. Maya reading. Maya sipping her water. Maya looking out the window. The photos were blurry and invasive. Next, she opened her email. She wasn't going to bother with the standard low-level complaint form. As a Platinum member, she had access to a priority executive concern email address. She began to type and the words flowed like venom. To executive.relations@apexair.com from caroline.hayes@hayesconsulting.net. Subject, urgent, security breach and staff hostility on Flight 101, JFK LAX, to whom it may concern. I'm writing this from my seat, 2C on Flight 101, and I have never felt more threatened or unsafe in my 15 years as a loyal Platinum Medallion member. There is an individual in Seat 1A, a young black female, possibly a teen, who is exhibiting deeply troubling and erratic behavior. Upon boarding, I witnessed her acting shiftily and secretively. When I politely questioned her presence in the first-class cabin, as she clearly did not appear to belong, she became immediately hostile, verbally abusive and aggressive, accusing me of harassment. I am concerned she is under the influence of narcotics or is otherwise unstable. She appears to have no valid reason for being in this cabin, and I suspect her ticket is fraudulent, possibly acquired through stolen credentials. The real problem, however, is your staff. When I reported this clear security risk to the lead flight attendant, a man named David, he was completely dismissive. He refused to check her ID, refused to verify her payment, and instead sided with her, threatening to remove me from the flight. I am now trapped on a 6-hour flight with an unstable individual in the most secure part of the cabin, and your crew is complicit in ignoring the threat. She keeps staring at me. I have attached photos as proof, and I am genuinely afraid of what she might do. I demand that this aircraft is met by security upon landing in Los Angeles to detain and question this individual. I also demand the immediate termination of the flight attendant, David. This is a complete failure of your security protocols. My company spends over $200,000 a year with Apex Air, and this is how you treat your most loyal customers? I expect a call from a high-level executive before we even land. Utterly appalled, Caroline M. Hayes. She attached the blurry photos, hit send, and leaned back in her seat, a grim smile of satisfaction on her face. She took a sip of her champagne. Let's see how arrogant that girl in 1A was when police officers were dragging her off the plane. 500 miles away, in the Apex Air corporate headquarters in Dallas, Texas, it was mid-afternoon. Sarah Jenkins, the vice president of executive customer relations, was in a budget meeting. Her phone, which she kept face up on the table for emergencies, buzzed with a red flag notification. The email from Caroline Hayes had been automatically escalated by the system's algorithm. Keywords like security breach, threatened, narcotics, and hostile, combined with the Platinum Medallion status and the specific executive concern email address, had bypassed the entire low-level queue. Sarah excused herself from the meeting and read the email in the hallway. Her first reaction was a deep, bone-weary sigh. It sounded like another first-class Karen complaint. 99% of these were gross exaggerations from passengers who were upset their pre-flight champagne wasn't the right vintage. Still, procedure was procedure. She had to investigate. She sat at her desk and pulled up the manifest for Flight 101. First, she checked the complainant, Passenger 2C, Hayes, Caroline. She brought up her file. The notes were extensive. Complaint, 2023. Flight attendant smiled in a mocking way. Complaint, 2022. Lounge croissants were insufficiently buttery. Complaint, 2021. Demanded pilot change altitude to avoid turbulence. Sarah rolled her eyes. A frequent flyer, yes, but also a professional pest. Then she pulled the information for the accused. Passenger 1A, Harrison Maya. Sarah Jenkins froze. Her blood ran cold. She didn't even need to cross-reference the name. She had been with the company for 10 years. She had helped plan the Harrison family's holiday travel. She knew exactly who Maya Harrison was. This wasn't a code red. This was a code black. She stared at the email again, this time in a state of growing horror. Unstable. Narcotics. Fraudulent ticket. Aggressive. She looked at the blurry, invasive photos of the CEO's daughter attached to the email. "Oh God," she whispered. "Oh, you stupid, stupid woman." Sarah didn't call her immediate boss. She bypassed 2 levels of management and called the direct line for the chief operating officer, who was in the building. "Mark, it's Sarah. I'm coming to your office. Now, we have a 5-alarm fire on Flight 101. A platinum passenger is actively harassing and has filed a false security report against Robert's daughter." She heard a colorful expletive on the other end of the line. "How bad is it?" "She attached photos of Maya," Sarah said, walking fast. "And she accused her of being a drug-addicted security threat." "Meet me in the car," Mark said, his voice flat with panic. "We're going to LAX. The boss is in a board meeting there. We have to get to him before the plane lands." Simultaneously, Mark was on another line, patching into the in-flight communication system. He had to get a message to the crew. But the problem was Robert Harrison was not just a CEO. He was a father. And someone had just called his 18-year-old daughter a criminal. This was no longer a customer service issue. It was an extinction-level event for Caroline Hayes. Robert Harrison, the CEO and founder of Apex Air, was a man who radiated calm, collected power. He was in a glass-walled boardroom on the 30th floor of a Los Angeles skyscraper, listening to a presentation about fuel hedging strategies. His phone, which was always on vibrate, buzzed on the table. It was his COO. He ignored it. It buzzed again, immediately. He held up a hand, silencing the presenter. "Excuse me, gentlemen." He picked up the phone. "Mark, I'm in a meeting." "Sir, you need to take this. It's about Maya." Robert's entire demeanor shifted. The genial CEO vanished, replaced by a father. "What's wrong? Is she okay?" "She's fine, sir. She's physically safe, but we have a situation on her flight." Mark quickly, clinically relayed the information. The confrontation at boarding, the harassment from passenger 2C, and the contents of the email. He read several lines verbatim. Accused her of being under the influence and a security risk. There was a dead, heavy silence on the line. The executives in the boardroom watched as Robert Harrison's face, normally so expressive, became a terrifyingly blank mask. His knuckles were white on his phone. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet, so devoid of emotion, it was infinitely more frightening than a shout. "Mark," he said, "listen to me very carefully. First, you will use the satellite phone to contact the purser, David. You will tell him from me that I am aware of the situation, that he is to ensure no one speaks to my daughter or looks at her for the remainder of the flight, and that I thank him for his professionalism. Tell him to extend my personal apologies to Maya for this failure." "Yes, sir." "Second, I want a team at the gate. I want you, Sarah, and 2 of our top LAX security directors there. When that jet bridge connects, my daughter is to be the first person off, and she is to be escorted directly to me. I'm leaving for the airport now." "What about the other passenger, sir? Miss Hayes?" Robert paused. Miss Hayes is to be detained on the aircraft. You will have the pilot make an announcement that all passengers must remain seated due to a security issue. Let her be the one who is publicly singled out. When the cabin is empty, I want her escorted by airport police to the LAX Operations Center. Not the lounge. The gray room with the one-way glass. I'll be there shortly. Sir, Mark said, the LAX police, what should we tell them? Tell them, Robert said, his voice like ice, that a passenger filed a fraudulent federal security report, knowingly creating a safety hazard and leveling a slanderous threat against another passenger. That is the truth. They will hold her. I'm on my way. He hung up without saying goodbye. He stood, grabbed his suit jacket, and looked at the stunned boardroom. Gentlemen, this meeting is over. We have a customer to attend to. Back on Flight 101, David the purser was in the galley when the discreet in-flight phone rang. He listened, his face going pale. Yes, Mr. Harrison. I understand, sir. Yes, I will. Thank you, sir. He hung up and took a deep, steadying breath. He walked to seat 1A. Maya looked up from her documentary. David knelt by the side of her suite, keeping his voice low. Miss Harrison, my name is David. I just got off the phone with your father. Maya's eyes widened. My dad? Is everything okay? He's fine. You're fine, David said, his voice full of a sudden, profound empathy. He was made aware of the incident with the other passenger. He sends his deepest apologies for the disturbance. He wants you to know that he is handling it. Is there anything at all I can get for you? A fresh blanket, anything? Maya finally understood. The email. The woman had actually done it. She had called her dad's own company on her. No, David, thank you, Maya said, her voice a little shaky. It's not your fault. You were just doing your job. Thank you, ma'am, he said. From 2C, Caroline Hayes watched this exchange. She saw the purser kneeling. She saw the deference, the quiet, respectful way he was speaking to the girl, her brow furrowed in confusion. Why was the staff apologizing to her? It didn't make any sense. A cold, tiny seed of doubt began to plant itself in her mind. The descent into Los Angeles was a symphony of shifting mechanics. The whoosh of the landing gear deploying, the subtle groan of the flaps extending, and the changing pitch of the engines were all familiar sounds to Caroline Hayes. But today she didn't hear them as the sounds of an ending journey. She heard them as an overture. She was vibrating with a vindictive, righteous energy. She had done her civic duty, and now the authorities were, quite literally, descending from the sky to validate her. She had spent the last hour of the flight rehearsing her statement for the ground security she was certain would be meeting the unstable girl in 1A. She would be firm, but concerned. I was simply worried for the safety of the passengers, she'd say. Her behavior was so erratic, and the purser, David, he completely dismissed me. He needs to be retrained, immediately. She watched Maya, who was now quietly packing her book and laptop into her backpack. Look at her, Caroline thought with a sneer. So calm, so arrogant. She has no idea what's waiting for her. The police will wipe that smug look right off her face. The plane's wheels kissed the tarmac of LAX with a gentle chirp, followed by the roar of the thrust reversers. As the A321T taxied toward the terminal, Caroline discreetly reapplied her lipstick, straightened the lapels of her tracksuit, and unclipped her seatbelt the very second the plane began to turn into the gate. The final thud of the nose gear locking into place was followed by the ping of the seatbelt sign turning off. Instantly, the cabin was filled with the familiar rustle of passengers standing, unclicking buckles, and grabbing bags from overhead bins. It was the sound of a 6-hour journey ending. Then a sharp click came over the PA system. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain speaking. His voice was not the warm, welcome to Los Angeles drawl they had heard at takeoff. It was sharp, official, and cold. Please return to your seats. All passengers must remain seated. I repeat, all passengers are to remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We are being met by airport security for a specific and mandatory passenger matter. Do not stand up or attempt to retrieve your luggage. A nervous, confused murmur rippled through the entire aircraft. In first class, a man in 3D, already halfway into the aisle, froze and slowly sat back down. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. People looked around, their expressions turning from weary to anxious. Security? Is it a bomb threat? Did someone get sick? Only Caroline Hayes was still. A thin, tight smile of pure vindication touched her lips. She settled back into 2C, her heart thrumming with triumph. "It's happening," she thought. "They got my email. They're taking this seriously." She deliberately turned her head to stare at 1A, waiting for the show. Maya, however, was just looking at her phone, which had just connected to the terminal Wi-Fi. A text had come through. "Dad. Landed. At the gate. See you in a minute." The cabin sat in a thick, uncomfortable silence for what felt like an eternity. A flight attendant walked stiffly down the aisle, her face an unreadable mask. "Please remain seated, sir. Fasten your belt. Thank you." Another click from the PA system. The captain's voice was back. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We have a specific directive for one passenger. Passenger in seat 2C, Miss Caroline M. Hayes." Caroline's entire body went rigid. The smile vanished, replaced by a slack-jawed, vacant stare. "What?" Her head snapped toward the intercom speaker, as if it had personally betrayed her. "Miss Caroline M. Hayes," the pilot repeated, his voice echoing in the deathly silent cabin. "Please remain in your seat. Your cooperation is not optional. You will wait for all other passengers to deplane. Ground security will meet you on the aircraft." The blood didn't just drain from Caroline's face. It evaporated. A hot, prickling, shameful heat flooded her neck and ears. This was wrong. This was a mistake. He'd read the seat number wrong. He meant 1A. He had to. But it was too late. Every single head in the first and business class cabins, and even those in the first few rows of economy craning to see, swiveled and fixed directly on her. The whispers were no longer anxious. They were accusatory. 2C, that's her. The one who was yelling at the flight attendant before takeoff. What did she do? I knew she was a problem. She looked unhinged. Her own words, her own judgments were being thrown back at her by a jury of her peers. She felt the sudden, crushing weight of 50 pairs of eyes. She, Caroline Hayes, a platinum medallion member, was being publicly shamed. She was the specific passenger matter. She was the security risk. "This is a mistake," she stammered, but her voice was a dry croak. "It's not me, it's her." She pointed a trembling finger toward 1A. No one was listening. The captain's voice came on one last time, his tone now returning to normal. "To all other passengers, you are now free to deplane. Please exit to your left. Thank you for flying Apex Air." The ding of the seatbelt sign was like a starting gun. David, the purser, appeared. He walked straight past Caroline's seat, 2C, as if it were empty. He didn't even grant her a sideways glance. He proceeded directly to 1A and, with a small, respectful smile, unclipped the blue security ribbon. "Miss Harrison," David said, his voice quiet but clear in the sudden hubbub. "Your escort is waiting for you at the end of the jet bridge. You're clear to deplane." Caroline watched, dumbfounded. "Miss Harrison? Escort?" Maya stood, slung her Stanford backpack over one shoulder, and stepped into the aisle. She was not smug. She was not triumphant. She just looked tired. She started her walk toward the exit, her sneakers silent on the carpet. As she passed 2C, Caroline, in a last, desperate act of denial, reached out and grabbed her arm. "Wait," she hissed. "You! Tell them I'm the victim here. Tell them what you did." Maya stopped. She looked down at Caroline's manicured, veiny hand gripping her hoodie. Then, slowly, she lifted her gaze to meet Caroline's. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her eyes, clear and steady, held a look that was far more devastating than anger. It was pity. It was a profound, bottomless, and utterly dismissive pity. It was the look of an adult watching a child throw a tantrum, knowing the consequences were already in motion, and that the tantrum was pointless. Maya gently, almost delicately, pulled her arm free from Caroline's grasp. She held her gaze for one more second, then turned and walked away, disappearing through the L1 door and onto the jet bridge. The humiliation was total. Caroline was now a pariah in her own kingdom. The other first-class passengers, the very people she identified with, filed past her, one by one. They stared. They whispered. One man, a CEO of a tech firm she'd recognized from the lounge, just shook his head in disgust. "Unbelievable," he muttered, loud enough for her to hear. Caroline was forced to sit there, pinned in her seat by 100 invisible spears of judgment, as the entire flight, first class, business, and finally, the long, slow-moving line from economy, emptied out. Each person who passed was another small cut, another reminder of her public disgrace. Finally, the cabin was empty. The sound of the last roller bag clicking down the jet bridge faded. The cabin was silent, filled with the stale air of a long-haul flight and the low, auxiliary whir of the ground power. Caroline was alone, trapped. She turned her face to the window, her body trembling with a mixture of rage and a new, cold, creeping terror. She looked out onto the sterile, blue and gray world of the gate area, and what she saw made her heart stop. It wasn't the usual chaotic crowd of relatives and taxi seekers. It was a reception, a receiving line of pure, unadulterated power. Standing at the end of the jet bridge in the center of a roped-off area was a tall man in a flawlessly tailored Tom Ford suit. His silver-flecked hair was perfect. His posture radiated an authority that made the armed police officers near him look like bellhops. Flanking him were people Caroline recognized. On his left was Sarah Jenkins, the vice president of customer relations, whose face was plastered on "We're Listening" posters in every Apex lounge. On his right was Mark Thompson, the chief operating officer, a man she'd seen profiled in Forbes. Next to them were two grim-faced men in dark suits with LAX operations director badges. "What is this?" she whispered to the empty cabin. "Why are they—" And then she watched as Maya, the security threat, the drug addict, the girl who didn't belong, walked out of the jet bridge and into this circle of power. She watched as the tall, imposing man's face, which had been set in a mask of cold fury, completely melted. He broke into a wide, warm, loving smile. He opened his arms. "Hey, sweetie." Caroline could just barely read his lips through the thick glass. He wrapped Maya in a powerful, protective hug and kissed the top of her head. The puzzle pieces, which had been flying in a chaotic storm in Caroline's mind, now slammed into place with the force of a physical blow. She tore her eyes from the scene and fumbled for the seatback pocket. Her hands, shaking violently, pulled out the glossy in-flight magazine. She ripped it open to the first page. A letter from our CEO. There he was, the same suit, the same silver-flecked hair, the same man, Robert Harrison, CEO and founder, Apex Air. Her eyes darted back to the window, back to the man, Robert Harrison, and then back to the name on the manifest she had seen David the purser holding. Harrison. Miss Harrison. "I just got off the phone with your father." "Oh no," Caroline gasped, a sound of pure, abject horror. "Oh my God. Oh no, 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 no." She hadn't just insulted a passenger. She hadn't just filed a complaint against a flight attendant. She had harassed, photographed, slandered, and filed a federal security report against the daughter of the one man who owned the entire airline, the man who owned the plane she was sitting on, the man who owned her platinum status, her 3 million air miles, and, for all intents and purposes, her future ability to ever fly again. As if sensing her stare, Robert Harrison, still 100 feet away, lifted his head. His daughter was now safe with Sarah Jenkins, being guided away. His fatherly smile was gone. His gaze, cold as the stratosphere, scanned the aircraft, passed over the cockpit, and landed, with chilling, laser-like precision, directly on the window of seat 2C. He couldn't have seen her, but she felt him. She felt that gaze lock onto her. Robert Harrison held her stare for a long, terrible second. Then, He gave a short, sharp nod to the two uniformed LAX police officers who had been standing at attention. The officers nodded back and turned. They began walking, their steps heavy and purposeful, toward the L1 door of the aircraft. They were coming for her. The cabin door, which had been a portal to freedom, was now the mouth of the abyss. Caroline Hayes heard the thud, thud, thud of heavy boots on the jet bridge. She heard the metallic click of equipment on their belts. The purser, David, reappeared in the aisle, his face a perfect, professional, and terrifying blank. "Miss Hayes," he said, his voice flat and devoid of all human emotion. "The officers are here for you. Please gather your belongings." Caroline tried to stand, but her legs had turned to water. The Chanel tracksuit felt like it was drenched in ice. "Please," she whimpered, the tears now coming hot and fast. "It was a mistake, a terrible misunderstanding. I'm a platinum member. I didn't know." "Your status has been noted, ma'am," David said, stepping aside. "Please, they are waiting. You are delaying the ground crew." Two large, uniformed officers filled the doorway, their faces impassive. "Ma'am," one of them said, his voice a deep baritone that permitted no argument, "we need you to come with us, now." Caroline Hayes was not taken to a lounge. She was not offered a comfortable chair, a bottle of water, or a sympathetic ear. The two LAX police officers, their faces impassive and their voices permitting no argument, escorted her from the aircraft. One walked in front, one behind. She was a prisoner, flanked by guards, in her own Chanel tracksuit. The walk was the longest of her life. They didn't go through the terminal. The lead officer badged them through a heavy gray, staff-only door, into the concrete and steel guts of LAX. The air was cold and smelled of jet fuel, industrial cleaner, and stale cigarettes. The only sounds were the distant, high-pitched whine of baggage cart motors and the thud, thud, thud of their footsteps on the linoleum floor. She tried to speak, to regain some semblance of control. "Officers, this is all a terrible mistake. I am a Platinum Medallion member. If you just call—" "Ma'am," the officer in front said, not breaking stride. "Please save your statements for the operations center." The words operations center sent a new, colder spike of fear through her. That didn't sound like a customer service desk. They led her down a long, fluorescent-lit hallway, a corridor of endless, buzzing white light, and stopped at a door marked LAX Operations, Interview 3. The officer badged it open and gestured. "Inside, ma'am." The room was a cube of cold, gray-painted cinder block. It contained a heavy metal table, 4 chairs bolted to the floor, and on one wall a large, dark panel of glass that she instantly recognized as a two-way mirror. She was being watched. The air was stale and hummed with the sound of the overhead light. It was a room with no power, no privilege, and no exit. "Please wait here," the officer said, and closed the door, the click of the lock echoing with sickening finality. Caroline was alone. She stood for a moment, her bright red Gucci carry-on looking garish and absurd on the scratched metal table. She was no longer Caroline Hayes, the jet-setter. She was a suspect. She sat, her legs trembling. She could feel the eyes on her from behind the mirror. She waited. Every second stretched into an agonizing minute. Her arrogance, which had been her armor for decades, was cracking, revealing the raw, sniveling panic underneath. "This is ridiculous," she whispered to the empty room. "This is insane. I'll sue them. I'll sue everyone. That little witch. This is her fault." The lock clicked again. The door opened. It was not Robert Harrison. It was Sarah Jenkins, the Vice President of Executive Customer Relations. She walked in, her face a mask of cold corporate professionalism. She was holding a thick red-bordered file folder. The officers did not follow her in, but remained posted outside the door. Sarah sat on the opposite side of the table. She did not introduce herself. She did not offer comfort. She placed the file on the table with a quiet thud. "Miss Hayes," Sarah began, her voice as sterile as the room, "we are here to conduct a formal security review of your actions on Flight 101. Caroline lunged at the familiar name, the sign of corporate structure she understood. Sarah, thank God, a sensible person. Listen, this has all been blown way out of proportion. I was simply concerned about a passenger. The girl in 1A, she was acting erratic, Sarah interrupted, opening the file. Under the influence of narcotics, a security risk, hostile and aggressive. Caroline flinched. Well, yes, she was. And your purser, David, he was completely rude. Let me be clear about what is happening, Miss Hayes, Sarah said, her voice cutting through Caroline's babble like a scalpel. This is not a customer service inquiry. You are not here to complain about the croissants. You are here to answer for your own behavior. She slid the first document across the table. Item 1. A formal signed report from Captain Miles and lead purser David, detailing your disruptive, belligerent, and harassing behavior during boarding, which delayed an international flight. She slid over a second set of papers. Item 2. A time-stamped log from our in-flight Wi-Fi provider, showing your purchase at 14:28 PT, and the email you sent to our executive team at 14:32 PT, the one where you fabricated a security threat against another passenger. She then slid a third item, a glossy 8x10 print. It was one of the blurry photos Caroline had taken. It was a picture of Maya looking out the window. Item 3. The photographs you took of an 18-year-old girl without her consent, which you then disseminated to our corporate office as proof for your fabricated claim. Caroline stared at the picture of Maya. I was gathering evidence. Evidence of what, Miss Hayes? Sarah's voice was relentless. Evidence that a young black woman was sitting in a seat you didn't think she deserved? I am not a racist, Caroline shrieked, the words echoing flatly off the cinder block walls. Your motives are not my concern, Sarah said, closing the file. Your actions are. You knowingly filed a false security report on an active flight. Who that passenger was is irrelevant. The issue is what you did. I want a lawyer, Caroline said, her voice trembling. You are not under arrest, Miss Hayes. You are free to leave at any time, Sarah said evenly. But you are not free of the consequences. On cue, the door opened again. This time, Robert Harrison walked in. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. He didn't radiate anger. He radiated an absolute, crushing, cold authority. He was not an angry father. He was a CEO, and Caroline Hayes was a liability he was about to liquidate. He didn't look at her. He looked at Sarah. Is the file complete? Yes, sir, Sarah said, standing. Report filed, evidence logged. Thank you, Sarah. You're dismissed. Sarah gathered the file and left, closing the door behind her. Caroline was now alone with the man who owned the sky she loved so much. He finally turned his gaze on her. It was not fire. It was absolute zero. Miss Hayes, he said. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it filled the room. I am Robert Harrison. You are in this room because you put my passengers, my crew, and my daughter at risk. The dam of Caroline's denial broke, and a torrent of panicked, groveling apologies poured out. Mr. Harrison, oh my God, Mr. Harrison, I am so sorry. I am so deeply, deeply embarrassed. I had no idea. I swear if I had known she was your daughter, I would never. I mean, she's so young, and she was in that hoodie, and she was. What? Robert interrupted, his voice dangerously soft. Finish the sentence, Miss Hayes. She was black? Is that the new Apex Air criteria for a security threat? Or did she just look like she didn't belong in a seat you felt entitled to? No, it wasn't like that, she sobbed. I'm not a racist. I'm a platinum member. I have been for 15 years. It was her last pathetic shield. Robert Harrison almost smiled. It was a terrible, thin-lipped expression. Your status. Yes, let's talk about that. You seem to believe that Platinum Medallion is a shield, a license to bully, to harass, to lie. You believe your $200,000 corporate account makes you untouchable. He took a step closer to the table. You are about to learn in excruciating detail how very, very touchable you are. He began to pace, his voice calm and measured, like a judge delivering a life sentence. First, the legal. You didn't just make a complaint, Miss Hayes. You committed a crime. You knowingly filed a false report. The U.S. Attorney for the Central District of California is, shall we say, very interested in cases like this. My legal team has already forwarded them your file, with our strong recommendation for prosecution under 49 U.S. Code Section 46504, interference with a flight crew. These officers, he gestured to the door, are deciding whether to detain you right now. The only reason you are not in handcuffs is because I asked them to wait until I was finished with you. Caroline's breath hitched. Prosecution, but it was just an email. Second, the financial, Robert continued, ignoring her. Per our contract of carriage, which you have violated in at least a dozen ways, your ticket is voided. Your return flight to New York is canceled. You will not be refunded. You will not be rebooked. You are, as of this moment, stranded in Los Angeles. No, she cried. You can't. I have to get home. I have meetings. Third, the status. This, he knew, was the one that would cut deep. Your status, your platinum card. That little piece of metal you have been using as a weapon for 15 years. Effective 90 seconds ago, your platinum medallion status and your LA_Caroline_Jr. corporate account have been permanently, irrevocably terminated. This hit her harder than the threat of prison. No, my miles. I have over 3 million miles. That's my property. You can't take that. They were never your property, Miss Hayes, Robert said, his voice flat. They were a privilege you just abused for the last time. They are gone. I'll fly Delta. I'll fly United. I'll sue you, she shrieked, her voice cracking. Fourth, the network, Robert said, holding up a hand to silence her. This is the part you failed to consider. You seem to be thinking, fine, I'll take my business elsewhere. But Apex Air is a founding member of the Star Alliance. A lifetime ban for a fraudulent, racially motivated security threat is not something we keep to ourselves. It is shared. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. As of today, you are not just banned from Apex. You are banned from all 26 partner airlines. Lufthansa, Air Canada, Singapore, United, all of them. You have been blacklisted from the largest airline network on Earth. Caroline stopped shrieking. A strange gurgling sound came from her throat. She stared at him, her mind unable to process the scale of this. Her entire identity, her jet-set life, erased. You can't, she whispered. You've grounded me. You grounded yourself, Miss Hayes, Robert said. And fifth, the one I know you'll appreciate. My team, as you can imagine, has been very busy this last hour. We looked into your associates, a Miss LA_Caroline_Jr. Your daughter, I believe. Caroline looked up, her face a mask of white, crumbling horror. What did you do? I did nothing, Robert said, walking to the door. You did. You, her mother, associated our brand with public harassment, racial profiling, and a federal crime. She was a travel influencer with a 12-month promotional contract with our marketing department. Had a contract. He opened the door. Our morals clause was invoked. Her contract was terminated, effective immediately. Her free travel perks are gone. The press release citing the termination is already drafted. You came to LA to visit your daughter. Instead, you just ruined her. He was done. He had taken her world apart, piece by piece. We are finished here, he said. He looked at the officers in the hall. She's all yours. Escort her to the public curb. I don't want her on airport property. She can find a bus. He walked away, his footsteps echoing down the hall. Mr. Harrison, wait! Caroline screamed. Please, I'll do anything! But he was gone. The officers stepped in. Ma'am, you're free to go. It wasn't a release. It was an expulsion. Caroline Hayes, the woman who lived in first-class lounges, was half carried, half dragged by security. a wailing, hysterical mess back through the sterile corridors. They didn't take her to her connecting flight. They didn't take her to a taxi stand. They escorted her, like a common criminal, past the long, staring lines at the check-in counters, the very counters she used to sweep past, and through the sliding glass doors, pushing her out onto the public curb, into the thick, smoggy, noisy chaos of the arrivals loop. Her expensive luggage was dumped on the concrete beside her. Cars honked. Shuttles belched diesel fumes. She was just another piece of human trash on the sidewalk. Her phone rang. She fumbled for it, her hands shaking so hard she could barely hold it. The screen read, LA_Caroline_Jr. She stared at it. She knew. That was the call. The call where her daughter, in a torrent of tears and rage, would be screaming, "Mom! Mom, what did you do?" The phone shrieked and shrieked. Caroline sank to the curb, next to her useless elite luggage, and let it ring. Miles away in the quiet, private parking garage reserved for executives, the thunk of a Tesla Model S door closed. Robert Harrison got into the passenger seat, letting out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for 3 hours. The anger, the ice, the CEO persona, all of it evaporated. He was just a dad. Maya was in the driver's seat, her playlist humming softly through the speakers. She'd had her permit for 2 years but rarely got to drive her dad's car. "You okay, Dad?" she asked, her voice quiet. He looked at his daughter. Brilliant, kind, strong, infinitely more of an adult than the woman in the gray room. "I am now, sweetie," he said, the tension finally leaving his shoulders. "I am now." He reached over and squeezed her hand. "You handled that with more grace than she, or I, deserved." Maya shrugged, looking out the windshield. "It's just tiring, you know. It's always something." "I know," he said, his voice thick with a love and pride that could move mountains. "But you never have to be tired alone." He smiled, the last of the ice melting. "Now I am starving, and you've got your license. How about you drive us to In-N-Out? My treat." Maya smiled back, a real, genuine smile. Double animal style," she said, putting the car into gear. "You got it," Robert said. The Tesla glided silently out of the garage, leaving the chaos of the airport behind them, and drove off into the California night. Thank you for listening to this story. What happened to Caroline Hayes wasn't bad luck, it was gravity. She built her world on a rotten foundation of entitlement and racism, and when she tried to pull someone else down, her whole world collapsed on top of her. In the real world, actions have real hard consequences. The world is full of people like Caroline, but it's also full of people like Maya and David, people who stand firm in their dignity and professionalism. What did you think of the karma she received? Was it too much, or was it exactly what she deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more dramas where karma delivers the final, satisfying word, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to see it, and be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. We have new stories coming every week, and you won't want to miss them.